I'm Jessica, 28, and I was 15 minutes late to Riverside Grill that Tuesday evening in September. The kind of late that happens when you're juggling 3 different client calls because your supportive fiancé decided to spend his afternoon playing golf instead of helping finalize the wedding venue details we discussed that morning. I spotted him immediately at our usual corner table, surrounded by his college buddies, Marcus, Kevin, and their wives Sarah and Michelle. The same group that had been enjoying dinners, weekend trips, and nights out that I'd been quietly funding for the better part of 2 years. I don't want to marry her anymore. She's just too pathetic for me. The words hit me like ice water as I stood frozen 3 steps behind Ryan's chair, close enough to see him gesture dismissively with his whiskey glass, the $24 top-shelf bourbon I'd been buying him since he'd lost his marketing job 18 months ago. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely blindsided by someone you trusted. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Ryan was completely unaware I was standing right behind him, back turned, holding court with his usual confidence. Marcus was practically cackling, and Sarah, who I'd always considered a friend, was covering her mouth to muffle her laughter. "Come on, man," Marcus said, wiping his eyes. "You've been together for 3 years. What changed?" "Nothing changed. I just realized I could do way better." Ryan took another sip of my expensive whiskey. "I mean, she's fine for now, but long term, I need someone with more ambition." The irony would have been funny if it weren't so crushing. The woman they were laughing about had been single-handedly keeping Ryan's life afloat while he figured things out and built his consulting business that existed only in motivational Instagram posts. Sarah noticed me first. Her face shifted from amused to horrified. But instead of warning Ryan, she just stared with wide eyes like watching a car accident unfold. "Look at what she does," Ryan continued, completely oblivious. "Event planning. She throws parties and calls it a career. My next girlfriend needs to have real professional success." More laughter rippled around the table. These people had attended events I'd organized, eaten at dinners I'd paid for, taken weekend trips to houses I'd rented. Not one of them seemed to find the irony worth mentioning. Kevin leaned forward conspiratorially. "So what's your exit strategy?" "Weddings in 6 weeks." "Already working on it?" Ryan said with satisfaction. "I've been creating some distance, showing we're not compatible. She'll probably call it off herself soon enough." He was orchestrating our breakup like a business merger, and I'd been too busy managing both our lives to notice the signs. Let me take you back to how we got here because the foundation of this disaster was laid carefully over 3 years. I met Ryan at a networking mixer in 2021. He was charming, confident, working at Sterling Marketing with big plans about launching his own consultancy. I was impressed by his ambition, his polished presentation, his apparent success. What I didn't know was that his expensive suits were maxed out credit cards, and his confidence was borrowed against a future that existed only in his imagination. Those early months were intoxicating. Ryan planned elaborate dates, new exclusive restaurants, showered me with attention. When he mentioned temporary cash flow issues during his transition to entrepreneurship, helping seemed natural. Just short-term, he promised, just until his business launched. The temporary help became permanent. It started with small things, dinner here, a weekend trip there. "I'll reimburse you when my biggest client pays their invoice next month." Next month came and went. The payment was delayed. His laptop crashed, car repairs. Always something urgent, always temporary. Always my generosity keeping us afloat. By year 2, I was covering rent on the luxury downtown apartment he'd insisted we needed to project success. I paid for the premium gym membership essential for networking. I funded the designer wardrobe that would help him close deals. Meanwhile, I worked 60-hour weeks building my event planning business, landing corporate clients, perfecting every detail to grow my reputation. Ryan's job applications became sporadic, then stopped altogether. His business meetings revealed themselves as golf games with friends. His networking events were happy hours I wasn't invited to because I wouldn't fit in with industry people. Standing behind his chair, listening to him dismiss my career and plan his escape from our relationship, I realized something that should have been obvious months ago. To Ryan and his friends, I'd never been a person. I'd been a resource. The worst part, Ryan continued, building momentum, is how she thinks paying for everything makes her this amazing girlfriend. It's actually kind of pathetic. That's when he turned around. The record scratch moment. Ryan's smug expression crashing into horror as our eyes met. The table falling silent as 6 people realized the subject of their entertainment was standing right there. "Jess," Ryan stammered, nearly dropping his glass. I wasn't expecting you." I looked at him. Really looked. This man I'd supported through every excuse, every broken promise, every month of unemployment disguised as entrepreneurship. This man I'd defended to friends who'd questioned his commitment. This man I'd planned to marry in 6 weeks. Slowly, deliberately, I twisted my engagement ring off my finger. The silence was so complete I could hear jazz playing softly in the background, the nervous shifting of chairs, the uncomfortable breathing of people who'd just realized they'd been caught. I placed the ring on the white tablecloth. It made a small, decisive click against the wood beneath. "Well," I said, my voice steady, "that saves me from wondering whether to return this or sell it to cover the wedding deposits you were never planning to honor." Ryan's face had gone pale. "Jess, wait. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. You meant every word." I looked around the table at each face. The only mistake was getting caught. Marcus attempted damage control. "Come on, Jessica, it was just guy talk. You know how it is." I smiled at him, not sarcasm, just genuine amusement at his desperation. "Marcus, how long have you known the apartment lease is in my name?" His mouth opened, then closed. "The car payments? Credit cards? All my name, my credit, my money." The discomfort was palpable. Sarah studied her hands like they contained life's greatest mysteries. "Here's the thing," I continued, voice never rising above conversation level. "You all think Ryan's quite the catch. This successful, charming guy who's settling for pathetic little me. But the truth is, for 18 months, I've been the only thing standing between your friend and complete financial collapse." Ryan was trying to form words, but nothing coherent emerged. I picked up my purse and stepped back. "The lease expires next month. The car loan is in my name, but the car can be returned to the dealership. Credit cards will be canceled tomorrow morning." I looked directly at Ryan. "Starting now, you'll discover exactly how successful you really are without someone else funding your lifestyle." Walking out of Riverside Grill felt like stepping out of my old life entirely. The September air was crisp, and for the first time in months, I could breathe deeply. Behind me, I heard muffled chaos, urgent whispers, scraping chairs, someone calling my name. I didn't turn around. The 3-block walk to my car gave me time to process what had just happened. 3 years of my life, finished. The October wedding we'd spent 8 months planning, canceled. The future I'd built my hopes around, revealed as an elaborate financial scam with me as the unwitting investor. But underneath the anger and humiliation was something unexpected. Relief. My phone rang before I reached my car. Ryan, obviously. I declined and immediately called my bank's customer service line. "This is Jessica Chen, account holder. I need to remove an authorized user from all accounts, effective immediately." The representative was efficient. Yes, they could block Ryan's access instantly. Yes, they could overnight replacement cards. Yes, they could place fraud alerts on all accounts. 3 years of financial entanglement, severed with a 15-minute phone call. Next, credit card companies. Same script, same results. Ryan's spending spree was officially over. My phone buzzed constantly with messages. Ryan, desperate to explain. Sarah, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. Marcus, asking if I was really going to be this dramatic. Because quietly funding someone's entire lifestyle for 3 years while they publicly humiliated you was perfectly reasonable. But stopping the money train was drama. I blocked all their numbers. At home, the apartment I'd been paying for, I found Ryan's spare key on the kitchen counter, along with his emergency credit card, cut neatly in half. A note in his handwriting, "We need to talk. This isn't how I wanted you to find out." Not how he'd wanted me to find out. Not, "I was wrong" or "I didn't mean it." Just regret that his managed exit strategy had been disrupted. I poured wine, the expensive bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion that never came, and began making lists. Vendors to contact about the wedding cancellation. Most deposits were non-refundable, but losing money was preferable to marrying someone who saw me as pathetic while spending that same money. Bills and accounts to transfer or cancel. Everything with Ryan's name needed to be severed. Friends to inform. Real friends. Not the social circle that came with Ryan's approval. Things I'd postponed while managing Ryan's life. The promotion requiring occasional travel that he'd opposed because he needed me available. The downtown apartment I'd wanted but couldn't afford while supporting 2 people. The Italy trip my best friend had been planning that I'd always declined because Ryan required constant availability. By midnight, significant progress. Wedding officially canceled. Utilities transferred to my name only. Real friends were shocked but supportive. I'd sent a deposit for Italy. My phone had stopped ringing around 11, which meant Ryan was probably at a bar, complaining to whoever would listen about unreasonable women and their vindictive behavior. Tomorrow he'd wake up to discover his car wouldn't start. I'd arranged voluntary repossession. His credit cards would be declined. His gym membership terminated. Tomorrow, Ryan would begin learning what his lifestyle actually cost when he had to pay for it himself. Day 2 of my new life started with Ryan pounding on my door at 7 a.m. "Jess, open up! We need to talk!" His voice carried panic I'd never heard before. Gone was the smooth confidence from dinner 2 nights earlier. I made coffee, good coffee, the expensive Jamaican blend I'd been saving for special occasions that never seemed to come, and checked emails while he continued his door-rattling symphony. The wedding venue was surprisingly understanding. The photographer kept her deposit but offered kind wishes. The florist suggested donating the arrangements to a nursing home. "I know you're in there. Your car is here." Around 7:30, Mrs. Patterson from next door appeared with a casserole and concerned expression. "Honey, that boy's been out there for an hour. Should I call the police?" "Actually, yes, that would be perfect." The pounding stopped abruptly when the patrol car arrived. Through my window, I watched Ryan try explaining to the officers that this was all a misunderstanding, that he lived here, that I was being unreasonable. They asked for proof of residency. He couldn't provide any. The officers were professional but firm. Mr. Morrison could not force entry into a residence where he wasn't on the lease. Continued disturbance would result in arrest. Did he understand? Ryan's defeated nod was visible even from my second-floor window. After the patrol car left, my phone immediately buzzed. Ryan's number, which I'd forgotten to block. I remedied that oversight while he presumably left a lengthy voicemail. Around noon, Sarah appeared at my door. This was more interesting. She'd actually been my friend, or so I'd thought. "Jessica, please, Ryan's a mess. He's been staying on Marcus's couch. Can't even afford groceries. You're being cruel." I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "Sarah, honest question. What did you think would happen when he publicly called me pathetic and announced he didn't want to marry me?" "He didn't mean it like that." "How did he mean it?" Sarah struggled for an answer. "He's scared about commitment. Guys say stupid things when they're scared. For 18 months, I've covered his expenses while he figured things out. During that time, did you ever suggest he might be taking advantage?" Her silence spoke volumes. "Did you ever think it was strange that I paid for every group dinner? Every trip? Every night out? I thought you were generous. When someone's generous with money they have, that's wonderful. When someone's generous because they're being pressured to maintain their partner's lifestyle, that's called being used." Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "So you really won't help him at all?" "I won't continue funding his life while he auditions replacements for pathetic little me. This isn't like you." Jessica. She was right. The old Jessica would have gone home that night, cried, and probably taken him back when he showed up with flowers and apologies. She would have convinced herself that public humiliation was just a misunderstanding. "I'm done being that version of me," I said. After Sarah left, I spent the afternoon researching downtown apartments, the area I'd always wanted but couldn't afford while supporting Ryan's expensive tastes. Turns out, on just my salary, I could afford quite a nice place. By the end of that first week, Ryan had tried every approach in his playbook. The guilt strategy, lengthy texts about how I was abandoning him, how cruel I was being, how this wasn't the woman he'd fallen in love with. The business strategy, emails outlining a reasonable repayment plan where he'd eventually reimburse me for everything once his consultancy launched. The romance strategy, flowers delivered to my office with cards promising he'd changed, that he'd realized how much he needed me. The desperation strategy, showing up at my office building, trying to convince security that I was his fiancé having a breakdown. None of it worked because I had one crucial advantage. I'd heard his real opinion of me. Once you know someone considers you pathetic, their sudden declarations of love ring pretty hollow. The flowers were particularly insulting. White roses, which Ryan thought were romantic, but which I'd mentioned disliking multiple times over 3 years. They reminded me of funerals. He'd never listened then, wasn't listening now. I gave them to my assistant, who was delighted. The repayment plan email was almost amusing. Ryan had spent days crafting a detailed proposal for how his marketing consultancy would generate enough revenue to repay my loans. Never mind that this consultancy had existed only in motivational social media posts for 18 months. His timeline was ambitious. 3 major clients within 6 months, build a team, expand to new markets. According to his projections, he'd start repaying me within a year. I responded with a single line, "Good luck with that." But the office building incident convinced me that blocking his number wasn't enough. Building security called up to warn me. "Miss Chen, there's a gentleman claiming to be your husband, says you're having a mental health crisis and he needs to take you home." My blood went cold. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I'd need ID showing shared last names and medical documentation if he was claiming you weren't competent." He couldn't provide either. "Thank you, Miguel. If he comes back, please call police." That evening, I contacted a lawyer. Not because I expected Ryan to become physically aggressive. He was too image-conscious for anything that messy. But because I needed legal protection. The apartment, car, credit cards, Everything was legitimately mine, but Ryan had been using it all as if it belonged to him. The lawyer was reassuring. Since everything was in my name and Ryan had no legal claims, I was within my rights to revoke access. She recommended documenting everything, keeping records of his contact attempts, and considering a restraining order if his behavior escalated. I also spoke with my boss, Elena, about the situation. So for 3 years, you've essentially been working 2 full-time jobs. Your actual job and managing this guy's entire life? I hadn't thought of it that way, but yes. And now that you don't have to do that, you'll have bandwidth for the promotion we discussed? The promotion I'd turned down because it required travel, which Ryan had opposed. He needed me available for his business meetings that never materialized and networking events that were actually expensive dinners with friends. Yes, I'd love to discuss that again. As I hung up, I realized Ryan's attempt to orchestrate our breakup had actually given me the push I needed to reclaim my own life. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting someone get exactly what they asked for. 3 weeks into my new reality, I was discovering interesting things about myself. I actually enjoyed cooking when I wasn't catering to someone else's expensive preferences. My apartment was significantly quieter without Ryan's constant phone calls to business contacts, who were actually friends arranging golf games. The promotion Elena offered was everything I'd hoped for. Senior event coordinator meant better clients, creative control, and a salary that easily supported my actual lifestyle without stretching every dollar. But the real education came from watching Ryan's carefully constructed world collapse in real time. Social media told the story better than any private investigator could. Ryan had always been active on Instagram, posting photos of expensive meals, designer clothes, luxury experiences. What he hadn't considered was how obvious it would become that none of those things were actually his. The first casualty was Elite Fitness, the high-end gym downtown where Ryan posted workout selfies among celebrity trainers and marble floors. When his membership was terminated, he tried maintaining appearances by posting from a basic commercial gym instead. The difference was unmistakable. No more chrome equipment and infinity pools. Just fluorescent lighting and machines past their prime. The car disappeared next. I only knew because Marcus posted an Instagram story showing Ryan standing beside a beat-up Honda, joking about his new ride. The car was clearly borrowed, probably from family, and clearly not the image Ryan wanted to project. When his lease ended in October, Ryan had nowhere to go except Marcus's couch. This might have stayed private, except Ryan couldn't resist maintaining his social calendar. Ryan had always been the one suggesting expensive restaurants for group dinners. He knew exclusive venues, could get hard-to-find reservations, insisted on celebrating everything with champagne and appetizers. Easy to be generous when spending other people's money. But Marcus was covering his basic expenses now, and even an investment banker's salary had limits. The group dynamic shifted quickly. Instead of trendy bistros, they met at sports bars. Instead of craft cocktails, they ordered beer. Instead of elaborate celebrations, they split appetizers with separate checks. Ryan tried adapting, but the struggle was visible. This was a man who'd built his identity around being the guy who knew the best places, could afford the good life, never worried about money because someone else handled that inconvenience. Now he was the guy bumming rides and asking friends to cover his dinner share. The social circle that had found his humiliation of me so entertaining was suddenly less amused when he became the one dragging down their lifestyle. "Have you heard from Ryan lately?" Sarah asked during one of her increasingly awkward check-ins. "No, and I don't plan to. He's really struggling, Jessica. I think he's learned his lesson." "What lesson would that be?" "That he can't treat people the way he treated you." I looked at her carefully. "Sarah, you were at that table. You laughed when he called me pathetic. You knew I was funding his lifestyle and never once suggested it might be unfair. What exactly do you think changed?" She shifted uncomfortably. "I feel terrible about that night. You feel terrible about getting caught. If I hadn't overheard, would any of you have told me what he really thought of me?" Silence. That's what I thought. The conversation ended with Sarah promising to stop trying to mediate, though I doubted she'd keep that promise. That afternoon, I signed the lease on a beautiful downtown apartment, the one with hardwood floors and city views that I'd admired for months but couldn't afford while supporting 2 people. On my salary alone, it was perfect. November brought unexpected entertainment when Ryan's mother called my office. Patricia Morrison had never been particularly warm during our relationship. I'd always sensed she thought Ryan could do better, but now she was practically pleading. "Jessica, I hope you don't mind me calling. I'm very concerned about Ryan." "Is he ill?" "Not physically, but he's been staying with his sister Amanda, and she says he's struggling." So Ryan had moved from Marcus's couch to family assistance. Not surprising. "I'm not sure how I can help with that. He says you won't return his calls. I was hoping we could talk, woman to woman." The presumption was remarkable. Mrs. Morrison, Ryan and I ended our relationship 4 months ago. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to be involved in his personal struggles. But you were together for 3 years. Surely you still care about him. I care about his well-being the same way I'd care about any person going through difficulties. But that doesn't make me responsible for solving them. Pause. Then, Jessica, I'm going to be direct. Ryan says you've been financially punitive, cutting off access to things he needs. I almost laughed. Mrs. Morrison, are you under the impression that I was required to support your son financially? Well, no, but you were engaged, planning a life together. We were. Until he told a room full of people that I was too pathetic to marry and that he was looking for someone better. After that, we stopped planning a life together. Longer pause. He says that was a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding was mine, thinking my fiancé respected me enough not to publicly humiliate me while spending my money. He's my son. I'm worried about him. Here's where I could have been cruel. I could have detailed exactly how much Ryan had cost me, described his complete lack of contribution, his entitlement, his assumption that my success was his to leverage. Instead, Mrs. Morrison, I understand your concern, but Ryan is 31 years old. If he's struggling financially, he needs to address that through employment and budgeting, not by expecting the woman he publicly rejected to continue funding his lifestyle. Surely you could help him just until he gets back on his feet. With respect, he was never on his feet. For 3 years, I supported him while he avoided steady employment. Continuing would enable him to keep avoiding responsibility. The conversation ended with Patricia promising to think about what I'd said. I suspected she'd actually find someone else to blame for Ryan's situation. 2 days later, Ryan's sister Amanda called. Unlike their mother's diplomatic approach, Amanda went straight for accusations. I don't know what game you're playing, Jessica, but it needs to stop. Excuse me? Ryan's falling apart. He can't afford basic necessities. He's sleeping on my couch because he can't make rent. This vindictive behavior isn't solving anything. Amanda, during our 3 years together, how often did you see Ryan pay for dinner when we went out as a group? What does that matter? How often? I don't remember him ever paying, but when we traveled for family events, who booked the hotels? You did, but who paid for rental cars? Flights? Gifts? Silence. Amanda, I spent 3 years financially supporting your brother while he pretended to run a business. I covered rent, car payments, credit cards, entertainment, even gym memberships. He's struggling now not because I'm vindictive, but because he's paying for his own lifestyle for the first time. But you have money. You can afford to help. I have money because I work for it, budget for it, and don't spend more than I earn. Ryan has no money because he never learned those skills. You're really going to abandon him completely? Amanda, Ryan abandoned our relationship when he decided I was too pathetic to marry. I'm simply declining to continue paying for the privilege of being insulted. She hung up on me, which I took as confirmation that Ryan's family was running out of people to blame. I did feel sorry for him. Not sorry enough to rescue him, but sorry enough to recognize that 3 years of avoiding financial responsibility had left him genuinely unprepared for independent living. But that was a problem Ryan needed to solve himself, preferably with career counseling and basic financial education. December arrived with Ryan apparently hitting rock bottom. I heard through the inevitable gossip network that he'd moved back into his childhood bedroom at his parents' house after his sister's patience ran out. He was working part-time at a call center, his first actual employment in nearly 2 years, and telling anyone who'd listen that I'd been controlling and financially abusive. The irony was lost on him entirely. Meanwhile, I was thriving in ways I hadn't expected. The promotion had opened doors to high-profile clients and creative projects I'd only dreamed about. My new downtown apartment was everything I'd wanted. Hardwood floors, city views, and most importantly, space that was entirely mine. I'd also started dating again, though cautiously. Coffee dates, casual dinners, nothing serious. It felt strange after 3 years of having every plan revolve around Ryan's needs and schedule. The Italy trip I'd booked had been magical. 2 weeks with my best friend Sarah exploring Tuscany, eating incredible food, and remembering what it felt like to make decisions based purely on what I wanted to do. When I'd posted photos on social media, several mutual acquaintances commented about how happy and relaxed I looked. It occurred to me that I probably hadn't looked either of those things for the past year of my relationship with Ryan. Christmas brought an unexpected gift, a text from Marcus. Hey, Jessica. I know things ended badly with Ryan, but I wanted to apologize for that night at dinner. We were all out of line, and I'm sorry we laughed. You deserved better from all of us. It was a small gesture, but it mattered. Acknowledgement that what happened wasn't just about Ryan's behavior, but about a whole group of people who'd been complicit in treating me poorly. I texted back, "Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it." A few days later, Kevin sent a similar message. Then Michelle. It seemed that watching Ryan's post-breakup spiral had given them some perspective on the dynamics they'd been enabling. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. My bank. I'd gone in to discuss investment options for the money I was no longer spending on Ryan's lifestyle, and my financial advisor had some interesting observations. Looking at your account history, your expenses dropped dramatically starting in September, she noted. Did something change in your living situation? I ended a relationship with someone who was financially dependent on me. She nodded knowingly. We see this sometimes. People don't realize how much supporting another adult costs until they stop doing it. Based on these numbers, you were covering about $1,500 per month in additional expenses. $1,500 a month. $18,000 a year. Over 3 years, I'd spent more than $50,000 maintaining Ryan's lifestyle while he contributed virtually nothing. The number was staggering, but also liberating. I wasn't vindictive or cruel or any of the things Ryan's family had accused me of being. I was simply a working professional who'd stopped subsidizing someone else's unemployment. January brought the final confrontation I'd been dreading. I was leaving my office one Thursday evening when I spotted Ryan waiting by my car. He looked different, thinner, wearing clothes that were clearly from discount stores rather than the designer brands he'd grown accustomed to on my credit cards. The confident swagger was completely gone. Jessica, he approached cautiously, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. Can we please talk? We've talked multiple times, Ryan. There's nothing left to discuss. 5 minutes, please. Against my better judgment, I stopped walking but remained standing by my car, keys ready. I wanted to tell you that I'm getting my life together. I have a job now. I'm living with my parents temporarily while I save up for my own place. That's good. I'm glad you're working. The thing is, he shifted his weight nervously. I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I realize I made some mistakes. I said things I didn't mean. I hurt you, and I want to make it right. I looked at him carefully. How do you plan to make it right? I want to pay you back. Everything you spent on me over the years. It might take time, but I want to do the right thing. This was interesting. Do you know how much that would be? I've been trying to calculate it. Maybe 10 or 15,000? Ryan, I spent over $50,000 supporting you during our relationship. His face went pale. That can't be right. It's very right. Rent, car payments, credit cards, groceries, entertainment, travel. $53,412 to be exact. The precision of the number, which I'd calculated during my investment planning session, seemed to hit him like a physical blow. I didn't realize. Of course you didn't. You never had to think about money because I was handling all of it. I can't pay back that much. I know. That's not why I mentioned it. He stood there for a moment, processing. Then, so what happens now? Now you continue building your independent life, and I continue building mine. That's it? We just never speak again? Ryan, what did you think was going to happen? That I'd take you back after you called me pathetic in front of our friends? That I'd go back to funding your lifestyle after you made it clear you were looking for someone better? I wasn't really looking for someone better. I was scared about getting married. Then you should have talked to me about being scared. You shouldn't have humiliated me publicly while planning your escape strategy. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I really did love you, Jessica. No, Ryan, you loved what I could do for you. You loved having your bills paid and your lifestyle maintained while you avoided adult responsibilities. That's not the same thing as loving me. That's not fair. What's not fair is spending 3 years of my life supporting someone who saw me as too pathetic to marry. I opened my car door, signaling the end of our conversation. I hope you figure things out, Ryan. I really do. But I won't be part of that process. As I drove away, I realized I felt lighter than I had in months. Not because I'd been cruel or vindictive, but because I'd finally closed a chapter that should have ended long ago. Spring brought news through the inevitable gossip network that made everything crystal clear. Ryan had moved into a small studio apartment across town, the kind of place with thin walls and no parking that he would have dismissed as beneath us during our relationship. He was still working at the call center, still telling anyone who would listen that his life had never been the same since I'd left him, as if I'd been the one to abandon our relationship rather than the one who'd overheard him calling me pathetic and planning his exit strategy. But what struck me most was that Ryan never took responsibility for any of it. According to mutual acquaintances, I was the villain who'd abandoned him when he needed support, the woman who'd been too controlling, too demanding, too focused on money. Not once did he acknowledge that he'd publicly humiliated me. Not once did he mention that he'd spent 3 years living off my income while contributing virtually nothing. Not once did he take accountability for the choices that led to his current situation. I was grocery shopping on a Saturday afternoon when I ran into Michelle. Kevin's wife from our old group. She seemed genuinely happy to see me. "Jessica, you look amazing. How are you?" "I'm doing really well. Thanks. How are you and Kevin?" "Good. Listen, I've been wanting to say something to you for months." She glanced around the produce section as if checking for eavesdroppers. That night at dinner when Ryan said those things, we all should have spoken up. It was wrong, and I'm sorry. I appreciate you saying that. For what it's worth, watching what happened afterward really opened our eyes. None of us realized how much you were supporting him financially. Most people didn't. Kevin feels terrible about it. We all do. And honestly, seeing Ryan these past few months, he hasn't learned anything from this experience. He still acts like he's the victim. This confirmed what I'd suspected. Ryan wasn't using this experience to grow or change. He was using it to reinforce his belief that everyone else was responsible for his problems. "How is he doing?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Not great. He's bitter, angry, constantly complaining about how unfair everything is. He talks about you like you're some kind of vindictive ex who destroyed his life out of spite." "Does he ever mention why we broke up?" Michelle looked uncomfortable. "He says it was because you couldn't handle him wanting independence. He never mentions the other stuff, like calling me pathetic in front of our friends, like planning to manipulate me into ending our engagement, like spending 3 years living off my income while contributing nothing." "That's about what I expected," I said. "Jessica, can I ask you something? Do you ever regret it, ending things so decisively?" I thought about that question as I selected apples. Did I regret discovering who Ryan really was? Did I regret stopping the financial support that enabled his avoidance of responsibility? Did I regret choosing my own self-respect over a relationship built on my utility? "No," I said finally. "I regret that it took me 3 years to realize what was happening, but I don't regret ending it. You seem happier, more yourself, if that makes sense." It did make sense. For 3 years, I'd been Jessica plus Ryan's needs. Jessica who managed Ryan's life. Jessica who funded Ryan's dreams. Now I was just Jessica. And that person was pretty great. 6 months later, I was having lunch with a client when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Usually I'd ignore it, but something made me glance at the screen. "Jessica, this is Ryan. I know you blocked my other number. Please don't hang up. I need to tell you something important." I almost deleted the message without reading further, but curiosity got the better of me. "I'm getting married. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Her name is Stephanie, and she's incredible. She believes in me in ways you never did. I'm finally with someone who appreciates me for who I am, not what I can provide financially. I hope you can be happy for me." I stared at the message for a long moment, then showed it to my client, a successful businesswoman in her 50s who'd become something of a mentor. "Let me guess," Linda said after reading. "This is the ex who was financially dependent on you? How did you know? She believes in me in ways you never did," is classic manipulator language. He's telling you that his new victim, sorry, girlfriend, is better than you because she's more gullible. Victim seems harsh. "Jessica, you told me you supported this man for 3 years while he avoided employment and then listened to him call you pathetic at a restaurant. Now he's messaging you about how his new girlfriend believes in him. What do you think that means?" I thought about it. What did it mean when someone like Ryan found a woman who believed in him? It probably meant he'd found someone willing to fund his lifestyle while he continued avoiding adult responsibilities. "I should probably warn her," I said half-jokingly. "Absolutely not. She'll figure it out on her own, just like you did. And when she does, she'll be stronger for having learned the lesson herself." Linda was right. Of course. Ryan's pattern would continue until he decided to change it, and based on everything I'd heard over the past year, change wasn't on his agenda. I deleted the message without responding. 3 weeks later, Sarah called with predictable news. "Did you know Ryan's engaged?" I heard. He posted about it constantly on social media. All about finding true love and real partnership and how his life is finally on track. Good for him. "Jessica, are you okay with this? I know you were together for a long time." "Sarah, I'm genuinely happy that Ryan found someone. I hope they're very happy together." And I meant it. Not because I thought the relationship would work out. Linda was probably right about Stephanie being his next source of financial support, but because Ryan's happiness was no longer my responsibility. "You don't sound upset." "Why would I be upset? Ryan getting engaged doesn't change anything about my life." "I guess I thought you might have some feelings about it." "I do have feelings about it. Relief that it's not me." The conversation ended with Sarah promising to stop updating me about Ryan's life, though I suspected she'd struggle to keep that promise. That evening, I reflected on how much my perspective had shifted over the past year. A year ago, news of Ryan's engagement would have devastated me. I would have questioned my decision, wondered if I'd given up too easily. tortured myself with thoughts of what might have been. Now, I felt nothing but gratitude that I'd had the courage to walk away when I did. The final chapter of Ryan's story came almost exactly 2 years after the restaurant incident. I was celebrating a major business milestone. My event planning company had just been featured in a national magazine when Marcus called. We'd rebuilt a friendship of sorts after his apology, and he occasionally updated me on mutual acquaintances. "You're not going to believe what happened with Ryan," he said. "Let me guess. The engagement ended badly. Worse, Stephanie found out about his pattern with previous relationships, including you. This was interesting." "How?" "Apparently, they were shopping for apartments together, and Ryan couldn't qualify for anything decent because his credit is destroyed. When Stephanie started asking questions about his financial history, he told her about his crazy controlling ex who'd ruined his credit out of spite. And Stephanie wasn't stupid. She did some digging, found people who knew both of you, got the real story. Turns out Ryan had been using her credit cards for months, just like he did with you. I felt genuine sympathy for Stephanie. Is she okay? She's fine. Cut him off completely, kicked him out, blocked him on everything. The whole thing took about 6 months from engagement to nuclear breakout. Where is Ryan now? Back with his parents, still working at the call center, still telling everyone who'll listen that women are materialistic and don't appreciate good men. The pattern was depressingly predictable. Ryan would find another woman, repeat the same cycle, and when it inevitably ended, blame everyone except himself. "Marcus, can I ask you something? Do you think Ryan will ever figure it out?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, no. I think he genuinely believes he's the victim in all these situations. He can't see that he's the common denominator." After we hung up, I sat in my beautiful apartment, the one I'd purchased entirely on my own income, and thought about the different paths our lives had taken. Ryan was back where he'd started 2 years ago, only now with a pattern of failed relationships and destroyed credit. He'd learned nothing, changed nothing, and would probably repeat the same mistakes with the next woman who fell for his charm. I, on the other hand, had built a successful business, bought my own home, traveled extensively, and learned to value myself based on who I was rather than what I could do for others. The next morning, I was reviewing contracts in my office when my assistant buzzed me. "Jessica, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." For a moment, I wondered if Ryan had finally tracked me down for one last attempt at reconciliation. But when she described the visitor, it was someone I didn't recognize. "Send him in, but stay nearby," I said. It wasn't Ryan. It was a man in his 30s, well-dressed but nervous, clutching a manila folder. "Ms. Chen, I'm David Mitchell. I'm a friend of Stephanie's. Ryan's ex-fiancé. She gave me your contact information. I hope that's okay. What can I do for you?" "I'm a journalist, and I'm working on an article about financial abuse in relationships. Stephanie thought you might be willing to share your experience." I leaned back in my chair, considering the request. "What kind of article?" "It's about patterns of financial manipulation, particularly how intelligent, successful people can find themselves supporting partners who contribute nothing but expect everything. The warning signs, the recovery process, how to protect yourself." "Why me specifically?" "Because according to Stephanie, you handled your situation perfectly. You discovered the manipulation, ended it cleanly, and rebuilt your life without looking back. She said you were an inspiration for how she handled her own situation with Ryan." I thought about this. How many other women were out there, funding men's lifestyles while being told they weren't good enough? How many were making excuses for partners who saw their success as something to exploit rather than celebrate? "I'd be willing to talk," I said finally, "on one condition." "What's that?" "Don't use Ryan's real name. This isn't about revenge or public humiliation. It's about helping other people recognize the patterns before they waste years of their lives." David smiled. "That's exactly what Stephanie said you'd say." 2 months later, the article was published. It focused on financial manipulation tactics, warning signs, and recovery strategies. My story was one of 3 featured, and the response was overwhelming. Women from across the country reached out, sharing their own experiences with financially dependent partners who'd made them feel guilty for wanting basic respect and reciprocity. But the message that meant the most came from an unexpected source. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi Jessica, this is Stephanie. I saw the article. Thank you for sharing your story. It helped me realize I wasn't crazy, and it gave me courage to end things with Ryan when I did. I hope you know how much your strength meant to someone you'd never even met." That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset over the city. 2 years ago, I'd been planning a wedding to a man who saw me as pathetic but useful. Tonight, I was independent, successful, and surrounded by people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. My phone rang. Unknown number. For a moment, I wondered if it might be Ryan, making one last attempt at contact. I let it go to voicemail. Whatever Ryan wanted to say, whatever final manipulation or justification or blame he wanted to deliver, I wasn't interested in hearing it. I'd heard everything I needed to hear that night at Riverside Grill, when he told his friends I was too pathetic to marry. Everything that happened after that was just him learning to live with the consequences of his own choices, and me learning to live without the weight of someone else's problems on my shoulders. Sometimes the most empowering thing you can do is simply refuse to be anyone's financial or emotional safety net when they've made it clear you're not worth their respect. Sometimes the best revenge is just building a life so good that you forget why you needed revenge in the first place. And sometimes, the most important conversation you'll ever have is the one where you finally tell someone, "You terminated this relationship when you called me pathetic. I just finalized what you started." Then you walk away, and you don't look back.